Okay, college football fans, good news, it's conference championship week. Bad news, it's conference championship week. It's good that we've reached this point in the season because this is our last step into finding out who will be the 4 teams that will be competing in this season's college football playoff. The bad thing about it is this ensures the college football season is one step closer to coming to a close for the year. However, we must always remain thankful for every single week of college football. Thanksgiving may be over, but being thankful for another week of college football will never be over. And this week is no different. Now, I want to talk about 2 things before I get into my picks this week. One, once again this year, I'm hosting a Bowl Mania group. Just like it has been in years past, it's a confidence pool. And how a confidence pool works is you pick all the bowl winners. Well, you make your predictions for all the bowl games. I think it's 40 this year. I think it's 40. So you'd rank them all from 1 to 40. Now, 40 is the most points. That's your highest confidence. And 1 is your lowest. So, for example, let's just say it's going to be a game of Memphis versus Georgia in a bowl game. Let's just say that you're very confident that Georgia will beat Memphis in that said bowl game, and you'd put 40 if you're really confident in it. However, if you want to pick Memphis but you're not quite sure if they can really pull it off, but you just want to gain a little bit of ground on your opponents in the bowl group or any other bowl group, you would put it as low amount of points as possible. So probably less than 10 if you want to go that route. So that's just an example. So let's get into my next thing I want to talk about. Today was a very shocking news story in college football. Chris Peterson has resigned as head coach of the Washington Huskies. Now, this is the most shocking one so far this season. There's always at least one coach firing or resignation in every season of college football. Last year we had Urban Meyer, and this year we have Chris Peterson. Now, Chris Peterson has done a phenomenal job as a head coach in his career because he has turned Boise State around, and he's also turned around Washington. He's led Washington to a college football playoff. He's led them to the Pac-12 championship. He's led them to multiple New Year's Six appearances. So he's turned Washington around. But this season, it was just not a good season for the Washington Huskies, arguably the most disappointing team in college football in 2019. But there was some factors that led into that. Only one returned defensive starter this season. The rest of that defense was inexperienced. New quarterback with Jacob Eason, which he's a solid quarterback, but not as dependable and reliable as Jake Browning was in his time with the Huskies. So Chris Peterson, I feel like maybe not this season, but maybe a season later, maybe a couple seasons down the line, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw Chris Peterson back coaching a college football team. Maybe not the Washington Huskies, maybe not Boise State, but possibly we could see Chris Peterson back coaching maybe a blue blood program, one that's trying to get back on the map. Like maybe Florida State could be in question if they can't figure things out in the next couple seasons. Maybe we could see him maybe try another group of 5 to maybe get them back on the map. Or get them on the map, make them relevant. But that's all I have on that. It's going to be interesting to find out who the next Washington coach will be. They did make their announcement on their head coach for the bowl game. But after that, it's just in question. So now the moment that we've all been waiting for, the conference championship predictions. Now, I'm predicting all 10 conference championship matchups this weekend because here at Johnny Talk Sports, we appreciate the group of 5. The group of 5 doesn't get much respect, and the group of 5 deserves respect. In fact, a big start for getting the group of 5 respect is expanding the college football playoff. Because I am tired of seeing these analysts saying, there's one analyst in particular, I don't really know who it is and I really don't care to know. every week, the analyst in question says, he always tweets, you want a extended college football playoff? You got it today. This team had a playoff game, they lost. This team had a playoff game, they lost. This team had one, they advanced. They advanced. Like, I'm tired of seeing that every single week from the analyst. I don't know who it is, and I really don't care to know. And I just don't care. Because a expansion to 8 teams for a college football playoff, it's going to benefit everybody. It'll even benefit the NCAA. It'll benefit Group of 5. And it'll benefit a lot of these powerhouses. It'll encourage them to schedule harder opponents for the non-conference play. But that is another video for another day. This is our main focus. So, conference championship weekend. Like I said a minute ago, all 10 this week. I'm going to begin with the Sun Belt Conference Championship. This one features Louisiana Lafayette and Appalachian State. Both of these teams have had historic seasons. Louisiana Lafayette, their best record in program history, and Appalachian State, 11-1 this season. Very impressive. They're ranked in the top 25. Unfortunately, they fell just short of hopefully getting to that Cotton Bowl that all these Group of 5 teams have been chasing down all season long. Their only loss is a close one to Georgia State. The same Georgia State team that beat Tennessee in Week 1. So in this matchup, this is a rematch of a regular season matchup. Appalachian State won 17-7 in the regular season. So pretty low scoring of a game. But both these teams, they look pretty even offensively. Both these teams are averaging just under 39 points per game. But it's very hard to beat the same team twice in a season. It's been demonstrated so many times that a rematch, the losing team tends to win a lot more often than the team that won in the regular season. We've seen that so many times, not even in college football. We've seen it in the NFL as well, countless times. And this time I'm picking Louisiana Lafayette to beat Appalachian State. I like the depth at the running back position for Louisiana Lafayette. It's one of the most underrated running games in the nation, and this weekend I think we're going to see that. I think Appalachian State is going to have a hard time stopping the depth at running back. I think that they're going to use the ground and pound technique that we've seen Wisconsin use consistently. We've seen Stanford use in the past. We've seen Alabama use in the past. We've seen Georgia use in the past, and even LSU before this high-octane offense led by Joe Burrow. So I'm picking the Raging Cajuns to win the Sun Belt Championship. Next, we got the MAC Championship between Miami, Ohio, and Central Michigan. And I'm going to pick the Chippewas in this conference championship because I'm not sure what to think of Miami, Ohio's offense. They're 96th in college football in scoring offense. It's the lowest amongst the conference championship teams that are participating in games this weekend. I haven't seen really much Group of 5 matchups this season, but I'm basing my pick just off of this and this alone. I think Miami's offense is going to really struggle against this Chippewas defense. I'm going to take the Chippewas to win the MAC. Next, we have the Conference USA. We've got UAB and Florida Atlantic. Now, this is a really good matchup. This is probably one of the best matchups that we have this week, at least on paper. UAB has a very talented defense, only giving them an average of 18.5 points per game. While Florida Atlantic, they have been hot to end the season. They didn't have a good start this season. They got blown out by Ohio State and Central Florida to begin the season. However, since that, the Owls have won 9 out of their last 10 games to put themselves in this position. And I think they continue to ride their hot streak. I'm going to pick FAU and Lane Kiffin to win this Conference USA Championship. And Lane Kiffin has somewhat been rumored to take the Arkansas head coaching position, and even a dark horse contender to take the Florida State position. So I'm going to take the Owls in this one. Next, we have the Mountain West I want to talk about next. Hawaii and Boise State. Now, Boise State won this matchup 59-37 in the regular season. However, with Boise State, this was with Hank Bachmeier at quarterback. And ever since Boise State has moved on with Jalen Henderson, he's looked pretty solid. However, I do think the Broncos are going to win this matchup. However, I think Cole McDonald, who's 8th in passing yards in the FBS, I think he's going to be able to keep Hawaii's offense in this game. I think this game is going to be much closer than it was in the regular season. I still think it's going to be very high scoring, but I think Hawaii makes this much closer than it was in the regular season. Next, I want to talk about the American Athletic Championship between Cincinnati and Memphis. Now, we saw these teams match up just this past Friday, and Desmond Ridder was not the quarterback in that game. His status for that game is uncertain. It's really uncertain who Cincinnati's quarterback is going to be. However, if the Bearcats want to win this game, Mike Warren is going to have a supporting cast around him. Because Mike Warren had 122 rushing yards in last week's matchup against Memphis. However, this Memphis offense, I think it's one of the most underrated offenses in college football. Led by Brady White, led by freshman sensation Kenneth Gainwell. I just think this Memphis offense is going to be too good for the Cincinnati defense to contain. However, if maybe one or two things go differently this week than it did last week for the Bearcats, I think the Bearcats have a good chance to win. But I just like this Memphis offense too much this season, and I really want to see them in the Cotton Bowl. So I'm going to pick Memphis. Next, I want to talk about the Pac-12 championship between Utah and Oregon. Now, this is one of the conference championship matchups this week that have potential college football playoff implications. Because with Alabama losing to Auburn, that eliminates the Tide out of the college football playoff, out of the race for the college football playoff. So Utah will most likely move up to number 5, or it could even be Oklahoma that does, considering Oklahoma has played some convincing competition in the last couple of weeks. They've played Baylor, they've played Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was ranked 21st in the country this past week, in the college football playoff ranking at least. So Oklahoma could jump Utah to 5. Now that is the biggest question that is going to be asked for tomorrow is number 5 going to be Utah or Oklahoma? Because who is it that controls their own destiny, sort of say? Considering that Georgia could most likely lose to LSU, or if LSU loses to Georgia, then what happens after that? So there are still some things to still be answered. But Oregon, with this class that Oregon has, this is Justin Herbert's last chance to make something positive from Oregon's program. Because Oregon, they have been fighting to become relevant again ever since the loss to Ohio State in the national championship the first year of this college football playoff format. So Justin Herbert, he came back for his senior season for big moments. And a big moment would be ending his career, spoiling the Pac-12's playoff hopes, and playing in the Rose Bowl in his final game. But I just like the senior leadership. I like the senior leadership on both sides. I think both offensive lines are going to be a huge difference in this game for which running back is going to have the best time or the easiest to get yards. And both defenses are doing really well, at least scoring defense-wise. But I just like Utah in this matchup. I just think Utah, they just want this more. I think Oregon's going to play a little bit laid back because I think Justin Herbert right now is just focused on the NFL draft at this point. That Utah, they know what they have to play for. And I like Utah to beat Oregon because I think Utah, they have a chip on their shoulder after last year's Pac-12 championship game. They came up so close, but yet so far away. But Utah, I think, gets redemption this season and wins the Pac-12. But the question is, would that be good enough to get to the college football playoff? Next one I want to talk about is the ACC championship between Virginia and Clemson. Virginia is in the ACC championship for the first time in school history. While Clemson, they are looking to once again make the college football playoff. A big key for this game for Virginia is somebody else has to make plays other than Bryce Perkins. Your team it can't revolve around Bryce Perkins, because if it does, and he's the only one making plays, then Clemson's going to rout Virginia in this game. But I think somebody else will make some plays for Virginia. I think Virginia's defense could keep Clemson in the game. They could keep Clemson off the field if they can force them in long yard situations. I think Virginia could have a chance to make this a game. I think Virginia does make this a game, but I think Clemson wins this at the very end. I think the later on in the game this goes, I think the better Clemson will be, because Clemson has been there and done that, while Virginia, this is their first ACC championship game in school history, and they're also coming off an emotional win over rival Virginia, beating Virginia for the first time in 15 years. So I'm taking Clemson to win by 17. I think Virginia keeps it close for a while, but as I said just a minute ago, the further on the game goes, the better Clemson is going to be. So I'm going to pick the Tigers. Next, we have the Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma and Baylor. Now, this is a rematch from a game in the regular season. Oklahoma beat Baylor in this one, but Baylor had a 28-3 lead in this game in the regular season, while Oklahoma came all the way back from that 25-point deficit to win the game. Now, I think this game is going to be a lot different. I think Oklahoma will win this by a much bigger margin. A big reason why Baylor was able to really be in this game, realistically dominate the game until the fourth quarter, was because CeeDee Lamb was not playing for the Sooners that night. And I think with CeeDee Lamb being in this time, I think it's going to really change the dynamic of this game than it did in the regular season. I think with CeeDee Lamb's impact, I think Oklahoma wins this by at least 2 touchdowns. I just think Baylor, they have proven themselves to be overrated at some points in the season, having close games in Texas Tech, TCU, West Virginia. I think it's about time that things get caught up with them. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to have a huge impact in this game, and I'm going to take the Sooners in this matchup by at least 2 possessions. And another big question for that is, will that be good enough to get to the college football playoff if Georgia were to lose the SEC championship game? And next, we've got the Big Ten championship game between Ohio State and Wisconsin. Another rematch from the regular season. Ohio State dominated this matchup against Wisconsin earlier in the season. In fact, I think the Buckeyes defense, they held Jonathan Taylor to a career low in rushing yards. And Chase Young, this was the game that really made him officially on the Heisman watch, where he was very disruptive on defense. Last week against the Wolverines, he didn't have the stats at all to back up his performance in the game, but he had a big impact in it. He was forcing plays to end a lot quicker than what they could and probably what possibly they should have ended. He was very disruptive on defense in that game, like he has all season. And just like a couple of other games that I've covered already, I think this is another game that is going to be closer this time around. However, I think the Buckeyes, they still find a way to dominate this matchup, because if the Buckeyes, they're able to contain Jonathan Taylor again, it's going to be a long evening for the Badgers. So I'm thinking the Buckeyes are going to win by at least 24 points this time. At least it's going to be a little bit closer than it was in the regular season. But I think Ohio State, they get another signature win this season against the Badgers, because I'm just not sure what to think of the Badgers offense. Yes, we've seen the Badgers passing offense a little bit in these last couple of weeks, but not against a defense like Ohio State's. I think it's going to be a long evening for the Badgers. I think the Buckeyes win by at least 17 to 24 points. I think it could be a little bit closer if Wisconsin, if they can ground and pound, try to keep Ohio State's offense off the field. But I just can't see them being in this game for long. I'm going to take the Buckeyes. And finally, we have the conference championship game of the week. Georgia and LSU, a top 4 matchup with a win. Georgia, it's going to cause chaos if Georgia wins this game, and if everything else I predicted comes true as well. We're going to have major chaos in this scenario. A scenario of chaos. Because if Georgia were to win, we'd have 1 loss LSU, 1 loss Georgia, 1 loss Oklahoma, and 1 loss Utah, fighting for 2 college football playoff spots. Or we could easily have a 1 loss LSU, 1 loss Oklahoma, or 1 loss Utah, fighting for 1 college football playoff spot. So this thing should get very interesting if Georgia ends up winning this game. But for Georgia to win this game, they're missing Pickens for the first half for his actions for fighting in the Georgia Tech game, and Cager is out with an injury. So Georgia is down at the wide receiver position. So can Georgia's defense keep the Bulldogs in the game? And the status for DeAndre Swift for this game is uncertain. He left the game early last week against Georgia Tech. So right now, Georgia, they are massive underdogs in this matchup. Georgia could realistically be 21-point underdogs at this point, considering how LSU has played all season long, and with these big injuries that are impacting Georgia offensively. But I think Georgia's going to be able to keep the Bulldogs in the game. I think a key for the Bulldogs in this one is to stay within 14 points. If you can stay within 14 points at the half, I think they got a good chance to make a second half comeback. Because in the first 3 quarters of a game, Georgia has done quite well. They played well in 3 quarters against Auburn, 3 quarters against Florida, 3 quarters against Texas A&M. A very good defensive performance for Georgia ever since the loss to South Carolina. But offensively, I'm still struggling to see it a little bit. And LSU's offense, we know what they're capable of. They are scoring 48, 49 points per game this season. So LSU's offense is the most explosive offense in college football. Joe Burrow is hoping to put a final stamp to his Heisman Trophy resume. The way I see this matchup, I think LSU is going to... I think there might be a little bit of nerves in this game. Because LSU, it's been quite a while since we've seen the Tigers in an SEC championship game, because we're always used to Alabama or Auburn in this SEC championship game representing the western side of the SEC. So this is Ed Ogeron's first SEC conference championship game. So there could be some nerves through there as well. So Kirby Smart has the experience in the SEC championship to keep the Bulldogs in this game. But in the end, as I said earlier, I just can't see Georgia offensively performing to win this game. The defense have to make multiple plays in this game to give Georgia even a glimmer of hope. I think the Tigers win this matchup. I'm really not sure by how much, though, because Georgia has really surprised me in the past couple of games against Alabama, where they had the intangibles to win, but they couldn't win it at the very end. So I'm taking the Tigers to win this pretty convincingly, because I just think Georgia's offensive struggles, they're going to come back to haunt them in this game. So those are my conference championship picks. So before I leave, I do want to reveal my latest ranking. At number 1, I finally see the respect for Ohio State and the respect they're getting. They've had 2 weeks in a row now. They've had big wins against Penn State and against Michigan. So Ohio State, they jump into my number 1 position. At number 2, I have LSU. They have a good resume as well. But Ohio State lately has done a lot better, I think, than LSU has, because LSU's defense, they have shown in some matchups this season that there are some gaps in their defense a little bit. Number 3, I have Clemson. Number 4, I have Georgia. Number 5, I have Utah. Number 6, I have Oklahoma. This could easily flip in my top 4, depending on how these two conference championship games, depending on how they play out. Even if Baylor beats Oklahoma, it can definitely flip depending on what happens. I have Baylor sitting at 7. At number 8, I have Wisconsin. I don't know why I put Wisconsin at number 8, but I just figured I'd put them there. Since they're participating in the college football conference championship weekend, just thought I'd put them in there. They don't really have an argument to me on why they should be in the college football playoff. Maybe if they didn't lose to Illinois, maybe they would have an argument to be in there. But I just can't see the Badgers having a legitimate argument. Although if they do beat Ohio State convincingly, if they beat them like very convincingly, maybe they do have an argument. Especially if Georgia beat LSU as well, and if Virginia were to upset Clemson. So the Badgers, they're probably still in by about maybe 0.2% to make the college football playoff, at least in my eyes. So that's all I wanted to address. So after the conference championship games are all said and done, after the final conference championship game, I will be back on Saturday night to give out my top 4. And especially because this is going to be debate again, especially if Georgia were to upset LSU. Would a one-loss LSU team still be in the running for one of the 4 playoff spots? And if LSU beats Georgia, who's going to get that 4th spot? Is it going to be Utah if they win the Pac-12, or the Big 12 champion? Who's it going to be? But every single year, except for maybe 1 or 2, we've had controversy. Although there was a little bit of controversy in, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd season that they were under the process of that. I think it was in 2016 when it was just a matter of seeding that was a little bit controversial. But hopefully we don't really have major controversy in this. I hope that maybe everything plays out. Although for the sake of all things, maybe Utah will lose to Oregon and LSU will beat Georgia, and then the Big 12 champion will get that 4th spot, and it's just all fair game. So hopefully that happens. Either way, I will be back, because even if Utah and Georgia, if they both lose and the Big 12 champion gets the 4th spot, it's really more about seeding at that point. So I will be back to discuss it. So enjoy your conference championship weekend, and I will see you for the NFL picks. If you're a loyal subscriber to this channel, you'll see me for my picks. Well, at least you'll hear about my NFL picks within the next probably day or 2. And I'll be back Saturday night. So I will see you then. Once again, join the Bowl Mania group. I'm hoping for about maybe 20, 25 people. The more people that are in there, the more fun bowl season will be. Take care.